Prelude to Revolution. The Navigation Acts of 1651. The Navigation Acts were designed to tighten the government's control over trade from England and the colonies. Imported goods from Asia and Africa had to arrive in England and its colonies on English ships. Imported goods from non-English America had to arrive in England and its colonies on English ships. England's American colonies could only export their goods in English ships. Imported goods from Europe had to arrive in England and England's ships. Any type of fish or whale products being imported into England had to be imported in England's ships. Salutary neglect. Salutary neglect was a British policy in the American colonies which allowed the colonists to violate the laws associated with trade. The British reversed the salutary neglect policies and forced the colonists to pay high taxes to pay off the British war debt from the French and Indian War. By the British imposing to reverse this caused an uprising against the government, which in turn caused the Boston Tea Party and eventually leads up to the American Revolution. Proclamation of 1763. After the French and Indian War, British forces tightened control over the colonies and didn't allow them to expand their lands any farther west. The purpose of this was to establish governments in the newly gained colonies and promote peace between colonists and the remaining Indian tribes. Sugar Act. The Sugar Act placed a tax on all the sugar and molasses imported into the colonies. The act was designed to stop trade between New England and the middle colonies with French, Dutch, and Spanish in the West Indies. This act angered the colonists, which resulted in them boycotting English products and caused the British to have a major financial deficit. The Sons of Liberty. They were formed by Samuel Adams and John Hancock. The Sons of Liberty were a secret group of American colonists formed to protect colonist rights against the British government and fought against British taxation. The Stamp Act. One of the primary causes of the Revolutionary War. It required that many documents such as licenses, diplomas, contracts, and playing cards to be printed on stamped paper that had a tax on it. The phrase "no taxation without representation" was created during this dispute over unnecessary taxing. The Quartering Act. This act gave British soldiers the right to live in colonist homes without compensation. Colonists also had to provide necessities for British troops, such as food, liquor, salt, and bedding. The Boston Massacre. The Boston Massacre happened on March 5, 1770, when a group of colonists were protesting and harassing a British sentry for trying to enforce the Townshend Acts, which were taxes inflicted on glass, lead, paints, paper, and tea being imported into the colonies. British soldiers came to support the sentry and ended up firing into the crowd of colonists, killing 3 people right then. 2 later died from their injuries. The Gaspee Affair. The Gaspee Affair occurred June 9, 1772, when a British customs ship docked in Rhode Island and the Sons of Liberty attacked and burned it down. The Tea Act. The Tea Act of 1773 occurred when all the Townshend Acts taxes were lifted off everything besides tea. Colonists boycotted the buying of tea in the colonies, this causing the East India Company to have an influx of tea and more than 1.3 million pounds of debt. The Boston Tea Party. On December 16, 1773, the Sons of Liberty boarded 3 British ships and threw about 342 cases of tea overboard, showing the East India Company and British Parliament their resentment. The Boston Tea Party showed the British how far the colonies would take it for their freedom, pushing both sides towards war. The Intolerable Acts. The Intolerable Acts were put into place for revenge from British Parliament after they had heard about the Boston Tea Party. The first Intolerable Act occurred on March 31, 1774, was closing the Boston ports. The second Intolerable Act occurred on May 20, 1774, which was revoking Massachusetts Constitution. The third Intolerable Act also occurred on May 20th, and it was the power to send all colonial trials under a British judge. The fourth Intolerable Act occurred on June 2, 1774, when a British Parliament made the colonists give the British soldiers shelter and food. The fifth Intolerable Act occurred on June 22, 1774, when Britain gave Canada authority over the colonies. First Continental Congress. First Continental Congress was a meeting in Philadelphia where representatives from every colony besides Georgia, because the royal governor blocked delegates from attending. They met to talk about their fight back against the intolerable acts. They made the decision to boycott the British goods and pass laws asserting colonial rights.